There we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Velero community meeting and open discussion. Today is October 20th, and per usual, we're going to start up with some status updates before we dive into the discussion topics. First up, we have Carlisia. You're on mute.
Hello. I'm on the community support this week, and yesterday I was triaging issues from the Velero repo. I was able to get through all of this week's and like the ones from like leftover from a couple like up to a couple weeks back. And there are some that are older than that, just like maybe 10. I want to get through them today and triage the issues on the other repos. I'm hoping that when we get our meeting, we're going to talk about our our extension of our support process. We're trying to make it better. So when we get to the meeting to do the planning for the support-a-thon, this is what we're going to talk about. There'll be nothing to be triaged, basically. So we can just hop on dividing up the investigation for everything. And there are a bunch of PRs. I'm gonna get to review those, and then I have to go back and tackle my broken tests. And that's it for me.
All right, awesome. Anything you need help with this week?
Not yet.
All right. Thank you, Carlisia. Any questions, comments for Carlisia before we move ahead? All right, Nolan.
Hey, so last week there was an important issue with how Velero brings persistent volumes in PVCs back into a cluster when it restores. This would be brand new clusters, or if you deleted a namespace and PVs in an existing cluster. So the fix is in main. Need to get version 1.5.2 and 1.4.3 out the door this week. So I may be working on that this afternoon, at least getting the release branches updated. That will 1.5.2 will include the fix that I think Anthony's on the call. Last week we were discussing some issues with the backup storage location controller instantiating the plugins a lot. 1.5.2 will include that fix. 1.4 doesn't have the backup storage location controller, so 1.4.3 won't get it. So next, as Carlisia mentioned, we're having what we're calling a support-a-thon. To expand on that, because I don't know that we've talked about this in a community meeting, but I'm guessing a lot of folks have noticed our support backlog in terms of new issues that may not have gotten a response yet has kind of grown across the core repo, plugin repos, and Helm. So our goal here is to take some time this week, Wednesday through Friday, and categorize these issues, sit down with a bunch of them and investigate them, or at least schedule them for investigation, and hopefully start with a clean slate so that we can go in with a refreshed support process and be more on top of these. And I have another topic related to this in the discussion topics. And then this is a V16 checkup. So I have a list of our priorities that I don't think was actually brought out to the community. But our number one priority for the 1.6 release is 1.6 cycle is getting end-to-end testing up and running. So Dave is working on that. Ashish, who just put out a ping that he is having internet issues. So he's not on the call right now. I've asked Ashish to help Dave with that. And then in terms of features, we want to get custom credential support in and update Rustic to v0.10. But mostly v16 is a tech debt release that we're getting end-to-end testing in, doing some queue builder migration, updating Rustic. So that's most of what v16 is. And in the discussion topics, I have a list of what those priorities are. That's for our team. If you want to contribute in the December time frame, we will do our best to accommodate getting your feature in, because I saw 2 design docs come in this morning. Excuse me. Any questions?
Hey Nolan, have you shared the kind of the rundown of the priorities for 1.6 outside of the end-to-end testing?
No, and that's what I was putting in the discussion topics.
Okay. Perfect.
I basically took bullet points and put them in the discussion topics. So I took our top 4 or 5. The end-to-end testing stuff, that may end up starting with some internal stuff that we have for the vSphere plugin. It may not all end up in the open source repo yet, but that's something we're going to try to get on an ongoing basis. But we're really trying to work on increasing the confidence, because Velero is a complex piece of software.
All right, awesome. Any questions, comments for Nola? All right, next up we have Bridget.
Hi everyone. So during last week, I made some changes to the PR that we discussed during last week's meeting, which is to do with Velero failing to delete the backup resource if the associated cloud resources are already missing from storage. I discovered an issue based on some of the changes that I had made following our discussion and comments from last week. So I need to just revisit that PR and hopefully I might have a chat with you, Nolan, on that issue or on that PR about the approach that I'm taking there. So if I could get some feedback from you on that, that would be great. Then last week, Ashish and I were working on some internal release processes that we had to do. So I was mostly shadowing what Ashish was doing to learn about those. And I've also been reviewing some of the design docs. I've spent quite a bit of time reviewing the waiting for additional items to be ready, using that as like an opportunity to really delve deep on some of the restore logic within Velero. So the design for that seems good. Might follow up and put a discussion topic just about, or just kind of ask the team in general just about the process for reviewing design docs and at what point do you consider them ready. I don't know if we have any guidelines on the kind of the process for reviewing design docs and at what point are they considered ready. So yeah, I don't really have anything else. So that's me. Thanks.
As a very quick comment, the design doc process is basically the same as code review. Is getting to review to approvals and no comments left.
Yeah, I would like to add to that. It's we don't have like a solid guideline, but it's what Nolan said. It's basically, I mean, at the least it needs 2 approvals, but if people have questions, as long as we read it and we understand, it doesn't, I mean, the idea of the design docs is we do have a guideline for design docs for how to write them. So if you're going to introduce a new variable, what are you going to name that variable? So all of that work is done up front. So in the PR, for the actual implementation, we have less things to review because that's always all been figured out up front. But as long as okay, is there going to be a new variable? What's it going to be named? Are those questions answered? And if we understand what the design is doing and the trade-offs, and we don't have any more questions, then that's when we say, okay, it's good for me, so I approve. Subjective, but it's basically if it's clear.
Yeah,
It's a
awesome.
very, very vague definition, but we'll
No,
know
that
it when we
helps.
see it.
No, thanks for the extra information. That's very helpful. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions, comments for Bridget? There we got Dave.
Yeah, so I was on PTO last week, so I didn't get a lot done. Back to working on the end-to-end tests. I'm trying to wrap my head around Ginkgo and just putting together a real basic test to start out with.
Cool. And why am I fuzzy? Are the end-to-end tests that you have for the plugin? I haven't looked at those in depth, but are those like based on Python, or are they some other way?
So what the rest of the Tanzu team is doing is Go-based stuff. So I just, I'm trying to like, kind of fumble my way through this because I don't know that there's actually, what the right way to do it is. So Ginkgo was suggested by the test team. That's what they're doing. I'm trying to wrap my head around the way Ginkgo figures things out and works through things. So I'm just putting together a basic test at this point that creates a namespace, will create some data into it, does a backup, deletes the namespace, restores it, and then verifies the data. And then from there, we'll at least have an idea of what happens. The existing tests, the Velero plugin tests, those are coded in a combo of Java and Python. And a lot of there's a rather large framework for both of those that's used internally that's not open source. So we can probably leverage those in terms of running our builds through them, but they're not really designed to run like on AWS or any of the other clouds, and they're not in a state where we can open source them, any part of it really.
Okay, cool. I was just curious about that. And I know we were looking at Ginkgo for as we move controllers into controller runtime, although then caught wind that the controller runtime folks are not abandoning Ginkgo, but like moving, not using as many features of Ginkgo as I guess.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's like, what does the test framework really need to do for you? And I'm still trying to figure out all the things. I'm trying to figure out exactly what Ginkgo really does. There's a lot of stuff about how you write your tests, in this manner, but it's like, yeah, I'm not sure that actually makes sense. But what I really want is I want to have a framework that runs everything, that tells us what's happening, and where we know, all the tests passed. Here's where the problem cases were, and we can drill down into them and look back over things. And I don't think Ginkgo actually does that, but I'm not sure there's anything that actually does. So my goal at this point is simply to write a test that actually does something and then look at it, because otherwise I'm just in analysis paralysis, trying to figure out, well, geez, is this, theoretically the right thing? And yeah.
I don't want to be that person who contributes to the analysis paralysis, but I also don't want to not mention this. I don't know how, like, if everybody is aware, I myself am not recalling 100%, but didn't the CAPI people say, like Andy Goldstein, and say that they are moving away from Ginkgo, their reasons, and they also offered to show us what they are doing instead? Would that be
I looked at some of their
applicable?
stuff. They're still doing the Ginkgo stuff. The test people are wanting to do Ginkgo. So I just wanted to write a test, run it,
Yeah.
and get my own view on what this thing does. But yeah, that's the next step, I think, is to, come up with some idea of what we're doing. There's a whole question of what is our end-to-end testing really. what are we really trying to do? And how much infrastructure do we build to, run tests? I have a test that I built for the plugin that does like data generation and verification.
Mhm.
But as far as I can tell, we don't have anything that, for example, verifies the Kubernetes resources at this point. And that's probably something we need to think about, is how do we know that we got our Kubernetes resources back to the state we wanted them to be in? And yeah, so the test framework, I'm trying to figure out how much value Ginkgo actually brings as a test framework. I'm not sure it actually brings all that much. There's a lot of talk about all the wonderful things it does, and then you boil it down, it's like, well, it runs tests in order and it handles assertions. So
Yeah, I think Ginkgo, in terms of what it does that's unique, is its BDD in Go. It brings cucumber-like expressions where you can say like describe, and it's meant to do like their claim is it does natural language type descriptions of tests, but it's kind of awkward in Go, I find. But
what I'm trying to figure out is like, what am I, so like, for example, Ginkgo says describe, an X. So what am I actually testing? Am I testing a backup restore? Am I testing a particular Velero command? Am I testing the whole process? Am I testing data generation? That's what I'm trying to wrap my head around. So I'm just poking at it at the moment and writing something.
May I make a suggestion? So it might be helpful. This I know you know this, but I could use a reminder like this if I were like deep into something like that. Might be helpful to remember we have unit tests. So we are actually testing, the internal of everything. So I think end-to-end testing like that is more like, this is an input and output, and try not to test like the interface so much, like because so that should be tested with the unit tests that we have.
Right. And so then when you look at that, so if I say, so like in Ginkgo, I can say, what does my current test look like? Let me share my screen real quick. So I'm basically, at this point, I'm doing a test for a backup. So I say describe backup.
Sorry, Dave,
is it too big?
It's too small. I can't see it.
I have to resize my VM window. And
oh yeah,
how's that?
That's good. Yep.
So Ginkgo, you say like describe the thing that you're testing is like we're testing a backup, but we really want to like back up and restore. So right now I'm just, I've got some really stupid stuff. It's like backing up namespace, when the backup's successful, there should be a backup name. We should be able to execute the backup. And then, I'm going to check, is it in the backup list? We should be able to renew the namespace, restore the namespace, and then verify the data. But that becomes very, just a list of steps essentially here. And I'd like to have something more like, hey, we generated data, we verified data. So I'm going to poke at this and I'm going to get something running and then try to think some more on it.
cool. Thanks for that detail. I think we can move on for this meeting, but appreciate you going into that.
All right. Let's move on to the discussion topics. Carlisia, you got the first one.
All right. Jonas, can you please bring up the, yeah, thank you. All right, so we have a community member on the call, and I forgot your name, I'm sorry.
Andre.
Andre?
Yes.
Okay, I can do that, Andre. So thank you for hopping in and participating. Basically, we had a request for developing or documenting if it was in existence a plugin, a Swift plugin for Velero. Then a kind soul hopped in and did some research and found this plugin, and then the developer of the plugin, which is Andre, hopped in and said, "Hey, I'll be glad to extend it." And so you take over and let us know the status of. So what we would like to know, because my question is, should we include this in the list of supported plugins supported by the community? So let us know where you are with this and if you're willing to continue maintaining it, please.
Yes, Nolan, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. Any person that makes a community plugin can make a PR against our repo. We have got our lists are in the Velero website in the repo. So anyone that maintains a plugin can absolutely add their plugin to our repo in the website.
So actually, that was my second item. So it has to come from the maintainer, from the developer?
It doesn't have to, but I mean,
do we do any due diligence? It's like anybody can put anything there, even if it's stale. Do we have any rule of thumb that we check? Because if we did, I forgot or I don't know.
We don't currently have a vetting process right now.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jonas.
Yeah, so we have two different tiers essentially on the plugin page. One is the plugins that are being maintained by the Velero maintainers, and the others are the community maintained ones. So far, none of them have gone stale, but if they do, I think it would be worthwhile to actually do a check every now and then and see if they are still working with new versions of Velero, if this plugin has gone stale and doesn't work with new versions of OpenStack Swift, for instance. I think that would be worthwhile to check in, to look into at a regular time interval.
I think if we have a guideline, excuse me, if we have a guideline like that, we should write it down somewhere. I don't
Document things. All right.
Huh? It's like, okay, what is stale? Is it 2 months, 2 years? You know what I mean? It's like.
Yep. Yeah, I think that would be great.
And then we can use the same guideline to maybe vet the inclusion of a plugin.
Yeah, I absolutely agree.
I'm not saying we have to have it. I'm just saying if we if we're going to be checking, then it makes sense that we also vet the inclusion.
If it's a process, we should definitely document the process. Abby, are you listening as well?
Yep, I'm here. All for documenting things.
Yeah, I think that makes total sense.
I'm all for documenting it because I know 2 months from now, if this happens again, I'll be like, what do we have a process?
So I just want the current process is we invite people who made their own plugins to create a PR against here. In terms of vetting and cleaning it up, I don't want to decide that right now. The reason being, I think that's a complicated process and there's gatekeeping we have to do when we vet something. And there's a rabbit hole that we go down of how do we decide who gets in and who's good and who's not. So I don't want to define that process right now, but as it exists to add yourself to the web page, it's as simple as a PR.
But anybody can do it. It doesn't have to be the maintainer.
Right.
Correct. When we first started out the plugin page, I actually reached out to the maintainers of different plugins and asked if they wanted to be a part of the web page, which I think is fair. And they said yes.
All right, Andre. So if you could open a PR.
This was kind of different because the PR was opened by someone else and I didn't see it. Then I got from one issue, it was linked to another, and I saw this today, so I wrote that yes, I am the maintainer, and like I'm okay with the listing. You get it? The point.
So, excuse me. One question that Andre was asking is if we would like to have was it an object store plugin? I forgot exactly. That you would be willing to also develop that?
Yeah, I can share my story with this
Excuse
plugin
me.
if you want, just shortly. Well, I was looking for a plugin for the OpenStack suite. There was one by, it was Cisco SSO or something like that, but it was, last commit was 2 years ago, so I already knew that it wouldn't work, it's like with the open source, and there was no note about if it is maintained or not. But there was one issue where this guy said that he is not longer working for the Cisco, so he stopped maintaining it. Therefore, I copied the. I didn't do fork because I didn't know what is broken, so I started to go all over and implemented this. And currently, it has implemented only the object storage part. The block storage part is not implemented yet. But as far as I know, it's not something complicated. It's just around 100 lines of code and doing some tests, automated tests, so that I'm sure if when this is community used, it just works with all the versions of Velero. This is one of like my main concerns, that about maintaining. It's not just to implement something, but to make it work with all the versions and all the changes that happen. So I think I will have to spend some time with the testing and doing it automated.
So with the exception there, let me see how I want to phrase this. So for the plugins here, when you do a PR, you essentially say what's supported and what's not supported. So for here, we got object storage supported, but not volume snapshotter because we're not implementing Cinder, right? So that would just be say, yeah, we got object storage and that's cool. And then we got a, yeah, and that's it essentially. And then we link to it.
Okay, so it could be, could start with object storage and rest will be implemented later.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Next
No problem.
thing on my list is we are hiring a product manager for us, for the Velero team. So if you know people, there is the link to the job description is a bit generic, but it's for the Velero team. Send them this link so they can apply.
Or if anyone on the call here would like to apply for a PM role, please do so.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Anybody listening to this, if you have questions also about what the job is or anything, you can ping us. You can ping me, definitely. I don't want to volunteer everybody. I'll be more than happy to clarify any questions regarding to how we work.
Awesome.
And the last item is Jonas got a promotion. Yay. Congratulations. He is now the head of community management.
Yeah, thank you.
Boss people around.
I'm not going to let the power go to my head. But thank you.
Yeah, well deserved, Jonas.
Any other questions, comments for Carlisia here? All right, and we'll dive into Nolan's discussion topics. We got tons of discussion topics today. I love it.
Yeah. So the first one is probably tossing a hand grenade out there because we could talk about this forever. but I want to get a temperature check for folks on whether or not they want to move, from our ZenHub Kanban board implementation to GitHub Projects. I was talking to Michael, our current PM, about this yesterday. He's unfortunately not able to be on the call, but something he mentioned to me was that Contour is on GitHub Projects. And when we first looked, GitHub Projects did not support cross repo linking, which is really important for Velero because we've got all these plugins and the Helm chart. GitHub Projects now have cross project linking, which is cool. And my motivation for proposing this is GitHub Projects puts it all in one place. We have it all in GitHub. Folks don't have to download a browser extension or go to a different website to get it. I have not looked at other alternatives to this yet. This is the only one I've seen so far. In talking to the Contour team, some of the downsides to it that I know of right now are that a GitHub issue that gets created out of the box does not automatically go on a board. And there's multiple, oh, another advantage is there's multiple project boards, which might be useful. So one thing we do is we can see on our ZenHub board, whenever a new issue comes in, it automatically goes into the board. Without GitHub Actions, this doesn't do it. This probably doesn't mean anything to anyone but the maintainers. And there's no concept of epics in GitHub Projects. So we can't have, we can't mark an issue as an epic and like link a bunch of stuff to it as a to-do item. We can do it in kind of a hacky way, but there's no formal support for epics. And then finally, there's the one-time switching cost of moving stuff over. I don't think there's an automatic data import. That is my question. I don't really have a pitch for GitHub Projects other than to say these are the advantages and disadvantages I can think of right now.
I have opinions. I know what you mean because I used it for a few other things. You do have to add a card, like an issue, like what you're saying, that an issue comes in, is a new issue, doesn't get automatically put anywhere on the project. It's super annoying. Now, with that said, I'll be on board with it because I never look at ZenHub. If we're not having a meeting where everybody is looking at the ZenHub, I never go there because it's not even so much that it feels like it's a separate tool. It's like it's taking me out of my contacts because I'm not averse to using multiple tools. It's just that it feels like it's a separate tool that doesn't help me because when I look at it through a column, is like the issue is there, the related PR is there, and then there's the epic is there too. And it's like, I have to contour myself and change so many things to like get a drilled down vision that is helpful, that is not worth it. So between having something that's totally useless for my day-to-day and trying something that has one annoying thing, but then once that's in place can be very useful. It's useful to see the lanes and see what what you did, and see actually like a little psychologically rewarding. So I'll be very on board to moving.
Anyone else have issues with ZenHub or issues with GitHub projects? Not issues in, but issues with.
I'm also curious for folks not in the maintainers team, do you check ZenHub at all? We broadcast that that's what people should be checking, but do folks not inside the maintainers team actually look?
I've been mainly just tracking the release dates and milestones and stuff, but mostly it's just the issues and the PRs for me.
Good feedback.
I think also with the minor annoyance of issues not automatically being put into a board, that project automation, the GitHub project automation action, the first example they have is moving new issues into a project. So we would have to install this on all relevant repos, but there's already a stock action that we can throw in there. So, excuse me, this is, that's something that can be worked around with actions. It's not, I looked around and GitHub has been getting a lot of requests to just do it by default, but so far they've been resistant to it. So it's not a thing that they're doing yet.
And this would be a project board under the Velero repo or the org?
This would be on the core Velero repo, and then it would point out to the AWS, GCP, Azure, CSI, and example plugins, and the Helm chart repo. I think that's everything. So 7 repos in total. And
I'm just wondering if this would work to automate putting an issue in another repo onto a board, which is tied to a different repo.
We would have to test it. I don't know. I know you can make a project that has multiple repos in it, but I don't know. That's a really good point. I don't know if you can target a board in a different repo with this. We may have to look around. And I asked Cappy, they do not use GitHub projects mostly because they don't own the repos, but that makes sense. Nobody really owns the GitHub or the Kubernetes in Kubernetes 6 repos. So, but yeah, another part of the motivation is I see we're folks don't tend to use ZenHub. So if folks aren't using it, then we should probably look for something else instead of trying to force folks into it. I put myself in that category too. So
anybody would have a problem moving away or concern moving away from ZenHub? Let
us know. We're not going to do it now. It's not going to happen today, but I'm not hearing any strong objections. So I'm going to double.
Yeah, just an easy one. Open up an issue and then give a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you want to do it or not.
Yep. I already have Michael as the PM. Michael's vote is all of his other projects are on GitHub Projects. So he wants it, but that was his opinion. He did not. We're not dictating this.
All right. Want to move over to 1.6?
Yeah. So the number one priority is implementing some form of end-to-end testing. From my perspective, I like the thought that Dave's putting into this in terms of what are we testing. I have an issue out there that's like a very, 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 very basic test. Like I think I was looking at starting at the level of, did the command successfully happen, and then building from there. But that's like the number one priority. After that, we looked at continuing to migrate over to controller runtime for our controllers. I don't remember the 3 controllers we picked for the 1.6 release. We may not have, but we we should do that soon, and get working on those. For those who don't know, we're taking a phased approach to moving all of our controllers to controller runtime and cube builder, and with the intention of, once we get them all over, we will eventually cut over to using the controller runtime client for Velero resources. And that will likely trigger Velero 2.0, simply in terms of API compatibility.
So addressing the question of which controllers we picked, I don't think we definitely didn't pick.
Okay.
I'm looking at the Epic, but we can address that easily.
Yeah.
So the download one is almost done. It's one stupid test.
Okay, so then really we have.
I tested like the CLI. I tested everything is working. It's just one actual automated test that.
And that one was. We were planning to get on 1.5, right?
We were planning, didn't get in. So
we have 3 more really.
Yeah, Ashish said he had started working on the backup one. I don't know where he is with that. So we could maybe pick 2 more. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, we'll check with him when he's available.
Yeah.
And then the next one is enabling use of custom credential providers. So we had a basic design doc out that Carlisia had started back in April. And we kind of, there's like a couple things wrapped up in this, but the overall gist is there's things that would be really useful to have. So things like multiple accounts per provider, right? You want to back up from one AWS account to another in the same region. I don't know that we're going to tackle multi-region in a provider on this, or time-limited credentials, those kinds of things. So this is like the big feature we want to get in. The rest is, from our perspective, the rest is going to be maintenance, and I encourage folks to read over this and make comments with their thoughts. I don't think we're going to be. I had made some comments about adding more scope to this, but I think I also walked those back later because I think they're actually different problems. So, yeah, and in full disclosure, this is something the Tanzu Mission Control team wants. They may end up coming to us and contributing this, but we don't know. So this is something our team is going to be tackling. And then finally, for those who haven't seen, Rustic has released 0.10.0. We need to, at the very least, get updated to v0.10.0 and make sure there's no problems. But we have a lot of Rustic stability issues, and by issues I mean GitHub issues that have been filed. So what I'd like to do is upgrade Rustic to v0.10.0 and then recheck all of those. See if there's still issues. Are they Rustic issues or are they Velero Rustic integration issues? So Rustic went about a year between updates. We've also had some talks about maybe moving Rustic into a fully fledged plugin model, so people could take Rustic out and maybe use their own plugin or their own file system plugin. Those are really early stages. If you would like to see that, please let us know. I know there's other folks out there using Copia, and I know Ashish wanted to play with a prototype of that. Since we're talking about December timeframe for 1.6, the immediate term is going to be Rustic 0.10, but we may start talking more about a plugin implementation for file system level backup. So those are the 4 highlights for 1.6 that I've got.
Awesome. Any questions here, Fong?
Okay. Next. Okay. So I have two issues I want to discuss. So one of them is the backup item in parallels, and the other one is the plugin timeout. So the backup in parallels, I look into this and I found that most of the backup item that we backup is pretty fast. It's metadata, right? It's pretty fast. So we're not really concerned much about them, except for the persistent volume. Right? The persistent volume is when we actually send out the command to take a snapshot. When we the plugin, like for example, the vSphere plugin, right? We send out to vCenter to take a snapshot of the PVC, even though it takes seconds, but sometimes it got stuck, and that's the main problem. And when we want to execute them in parallel, we also want to these things, being executed parallel very fast, so we can snapshot these PVC as close as possible to each other. So this backup resource in parallel, I think I can mainly focus on just the PVC. But when I look at the current way we doing our backup pod, and I found that when we backup a pod, we look into the PVC belongs to that pod, and then we snapshot, and then we execute. We also backup the PV bound to that PVC. So that pod PVC is linked together in one, like we can look at it as one action. So in order to we want if we ultimately want to snapshot these PVC together, but the way we currently implement the backup in the data path right now is that we do the per PVC per pod. So because of that, I propose that instead of doing PVC in parallel, we can backup pods in parallel, and when we execute the pod, we will execute the backing up the PVC and PV belong to that pod together in that one chunk, and we can run them in parallel. So that way, it satisfies what I need, but also it keep the current workflow of the backup data path almost intact. We only need to manipulate only one small chunk of the code, so that when they do backup pods, they just backup these pods in parallel, and that's it. So that is what I propose, and I think I'm gonna write down a design doc sometime this week or maybe next week, so we can discuss in detail. But that is my number one item on the discussion list. Does anyone have any opinion on that, or we can talk it offline in Slack?
I think I want to avoid special casing things. So, PVCs and pods and all these other things are kind of handled in special cases. And I don't want to add more special case code where, we do pods in parallel, but nothing else. And so I'd like to have a design that kind of looks at all kinds of different items, and they have a generalized solution, because otherwise we wind up like, oh, pods are special, and now there's other special things, and it gets weird.
Yeah, I agree. I would rather start trying to do it general, and like we need a really, really, really good reason not to do the general one. The other question I have is how this affects the plugins. Like, would the plugins run in parallel, or are you spinning up multiple plugins to do this work? I think you would end up doing it if you just, like, in a naive implementation, if you just spin up a Go routine to run the functions as they are. I think that's going to end up spinning up a plugin per resource.
I thought it checked to see if there was already a plugin running.
It might. Oh yeah, it does. I need to look to see if those plugins can handle multiples though.
Yeah,
Okay.
because they're going to get a gRPC request, and I'm not sure if they
Right.
get
And
3.1.
they were not designed for this. I mean, if they need to be updated, they should. I just think in a naive implementation.
I think that's a good feedback. Let me to be honest, I need sound like I need to dig into these plugin a little bit more to see if they support, multiple running in parallel. Because if they're not, then none of this would matter.
Yeah, and the vSphere plugin, if you're really concerned with that one, I mean that actually has a radical redesign for the 1.10 release. So
oh really?
Yeah, you can check in with Sukarna, or we can take a look at it. The code's all there in the repository. I haven't done an architecture docker yet, but we had to do a lot of changes in order to support the project-specific architecture.
I work with Sima and Sukana in this vSphere plugin, and from what they update to me, they did move. They plan to move. Currently, they're doing the persistent volume plugin, and they want to move it into the backup item plugins. But besides that, I'm not really understand the detail for that one. Yeah. But let me talk to them to see, get the update for that one.
There's a lot of big changes there. You can bug me a little bit on that, but we're trying to get the release out for that one right now.
Oh, thank you. In that case, then let me talk to you offline about that then.
I guess the one other thing I'll say about the plugin, if we make this a generic case, we definitely need to make sure all the plugins can fan out, because we could be running it against anything, since you can write plugins to match against anything. And the other thing is, since they're fanning out, we may bump into and they run in the Velero pod. You may run into Velero pod limits, so we might have to look at, as part of this, we may have to bump up the Velero pod resource requests.
Yeah, we may also run into limitations from the underlying storage system.
Yeah, so I will take a look at these items, and I'm gonna work on that item in the next maybe 1 week or 2. All right, thank you. The second item I want to talk about is also related to this, which is the timeout, right? So when we so I have a design for that, and it's in a PR right now. I can talk about briefly here, but basically the PR is about, instead of just focus on the timeout from one plugin or for the plugin, what I really ultimately I want is that when I run a backup, on that persistent volume, and it have to run some plugin, all of the plugin on that object have to be finished within a certain amount of time. If I put in the timeout for this plugin, but forgot to put in the timeout from the other plugin, but both of them running on the same object, and the adding together, they can exceed that timeout. So instead of specify for each of these individual plugin, I just want to specify that, for example, for PV, I just give it 2 minutes. No more than 2 minutes. If it's 2 minutes, timeout. Doesn't matter how many plugin is running on that PV. So that is the general idea. And I also, the idea also behind that is that not all the application having the same timeout requirement. For example, if I run a cache consistent backup, I mean, it takes 5 minutes to do the snapshot, is no problem, because I don't have any app consistent requirement on it. But if I run it on an app consistent, then before I run backup, I test the application, and that caused the application to block all the user interaction. In such case, then I need to take this, run this plugin within a few seconds or few milliseconds that the application requires. And each application may have different requirement for each of these. So that is the design that I propose. So I just want to bring it out here, so that in case if anyone have any opinion on that one, otherwise you can put it in the review for that.
Are you passing the timeout down? You're not passing the timeout down to the plugins yet, though, are you?
Nope, I will not passing the timeout to individual plugin. I just, when we execute a function called execute action, I just wrap around that with the timeout.
So the whacking the function isn't a bad thing, but I'd like to also have timeouts go down to the plugins so that they know when they're supposed to be done. And if there's a bug in the plugin, that's one thing. But so for example, like if you have a snapshot operation that's taking a long time and you cancel the function, you're going to wind up, but the snapshot actually succeeds, you're going to wind up with an orphan snapshot lying around, and there's no way to clean that up. So it'd be nice if the plugins were participating in this and they knew that the timeout, that they'd exceeded their timeout, and maybe they should queue up a background task to delete whatever they just created or whatever.
So you meant to pass the plugin time to the plugin itself, right?
Yeah. So the plugin is the first thing that's responsible for satisfying the timeout, and then if the plugin exceeds the timeout by some amount, you can take 10% off or something, and then you'll actually whack the function.
Okay, that's actually a good suggestion. If that involving to change the plugin API to pass that parameter in, right? I'm not sure currently. I need to take a look deeper into the spec of the plugin right now to see what parameter is accepted.
Yeah, I don't think there is a parameter at the moment, but that would be good to discuss.
Just a quick time check. We're almost out. Yeah, please continue this discussion up on the issue, the PR, and on Slack. Dylan, do you want to talk about yours quickly before we wrap up here?
Yeah, this will just take a second. Last community call, we briefly discussed how we were interested in taking on the restore progress design proposal. So we went ahead and did that. And then I think it was brought up that we kind of discussed breaking this up into phases. But as we went through it last week, Pranav kind of came up with a good way of solving this, taking the two-stage approach that we discussed. So we're just interested in getting feedback if anyone has an opportunity to take a look at that. And I know that 1.6 sounds like a tech debt release, but if there is any possibility we get this in there, that would be cool, but I'll leave that up to you guys. Just throwing that out there. Thanks.
Thank you, Dylan. All right, quickly before we wrap up, Nolan, do you want to go over the community shoutouts?
Yeah, really quickly, thank you to Anthony Bett for providing the fix for the backup storage location to avoid spinning up object storage plugins when the backup storage location wasn't actually due for checking. And thank you to, I do not know this person's name, Gliptak for Gabor Liptak, for updating Go to 1.15 on our build image. That's super helpful. Next, Ariana Uka reported this issue back in May, and it admittedly took us some back and forth to identify the issue, but this was a very important bug that he identified, and we thank him for providing replication cases and sticking with us. And then finally, thanks to Pranav for getting the design doc up for progress reporting, and thank you to Thong for the design doc for the timeouts.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining today. This is it for this week. Have a fantastic rest of the week, everyone, and see you all next time.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.